Okay, good evening, everyone. Again, welcome to the Lawn Watering Fundamentals webinar. My name is Lance Ackerman. I'm a water conservation specialist with Colorado Springs Utilities, and I help customers have a successful landscape while using the water wisely and putting that water to the most beneficial use within their landscape. I have a degree from Colorado State University in landscape horticulture with a concentration in landscape design and contracting. I have over 10 years of experience within the industry. My main special area is specializing in irrigation installation and efficiency. I hold certifications from the Irrigation Association, a certified irrigation technician, as well as a certified landscape irrigation auditor. And I am native to Colorado, so I haven't gone far. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our lawn watering fundamentals. So tonight we'll be talking about when is the best time to water, how often should you be watering, and how much time should you be watering for. And then we'll take we'll take it a step further, and I'll give you a couple more efficiency tips where you can really kind of start to interact and engage with your irrigation system to put that water to most beneficial use. And then finally, we'll tie it all together with some lawn maintenance best practices. So irrigation best practices and lawn maintenance best practices kind of go hand in hand for a really successful lawn here in Colorado Springs. So the question is what is the best time to water? So really the foundation and the starting point for when the best time to water is what your personal needs are, or your what your lifestyle is pertaining to. And what I mean by that is I have this beautiful picture on the right hand side here. It looks like these folks might like to do a lot of entertaining at night, perhaps after 9 p.m. So they prefer not to have their irrigation system running while they're having that family barbecue or that friendly get together during the summer. So, or perhaps you're an early morning riser, you had to go to work early in the morning, so you prefer not to have to run through the sprinkler system in order to get into your car to go to work. Then the question becomes, is it best to water morning or late at night? So the starting point is we do have the WaterWise rules, and you really want to make sure that your irrigation is occurring before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m. But other than that, it's really best to choose one or the other. So for example, I would not recommend to have irrigation occurring, let's for example say at 5 a.m. in the morning, and you're running that irrigation for 10 minutes in the morning, and then again 10 minutes at night. Because what's happening is you're kind of giving that lawn a short burst of water, and it's encouraging a shallow rooting system, because then it has the entire day to dry out, and then you add an additional 10 minutes of water at night. So your root systems are really as deep as that water is driving. If you're only watering shallow, that's kind of how your root systems will behave. So choosing one or the other, they're both equally a great option. Just make sure that irrigation is occurring before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m. The other question I get about the time that you should water is, what about fungus? And my answer to that is, in our climate here, we have a picture of of what Colorado Springs looked like way back in the day before it was developed. And in our semi-arid climate, we just are not prone to any fungus or mold or things of that nature if you're watering late at night or really early in the morning. So fungus or mold, things of that nature are not a concern in our climate. So feel free to water, like I said, either early in the morning or late at night. It's just your preference on your lifestyle. So the next question is, how often should I water? So the top recommendations are 3 days per week or less. And that's kind of depending on the season. So my next bullet here is watering according to the season. You should be watering according to weather. And that kind of goes back to interacting with your irrigation system. And you want to make sure that you're pairing the correct sprinkler type with the landscape and watering accordingly to that plant need. So 3 days per week or watering according to the season. Here in this graphic, you'll see that we recommend 1 day per week in April, 2 days per week in May, June, July, and August, 3 watering days. And then as we get into the fall and we start to receive some cooler temperatures, we'll start to dial down that irrigation back to 2 days per week in September and 1 day per week in October. And you might be seeing some alarm bells here with this graphic here, and you might be asking yourself, do they really recommend that we watered 2 days per week here last month when we had all that precipitation, we had a lot of cooler weather? And that's what I say, really, it's watering according to the season or according to the weather. So this graphic here is just based off historical weather data, just kind of a traditional weather pattern. But as we all know here in Colorado, and especially in Colorado Springs, our weather is extremely variable. So it's really important to interact with your irrigation system and just use this as a guideline. But the importance of this graphic here is what we really do not want to have happening is to turn the irrigation system on in the spring and let it run for 3 days per week all the way through the end of October, because your lawn just really doesn't need all that water. There's really 3 main sprinkler application methods, and those are overhead, point source drip, and inline drip. And within the overhead category, we have 3 main types of overhead irrigation. And as you can see here, it's recommended to pair overhead irrigation with watering your lawns. And the picture on the right-hand side here is a pop-up or a fixed spray sprinkler head. Those are very, very common in a residential home setting. How they work is they pop up about 4 inches. They have a fixed spray pattern. They're going to spray in a distance of maybe 8, 10, 12, or 15 feet. It's going to be in a fixed pattern of 90 degrees or 180 degrees or a full 360 or full circle. So those are the pop-up fixed spray sprinkler. So the next type here that I'm going to talk about is a multi-stream rotary nozzle. So it's the same sprinkler head. We've just retrofitted that sprinkler nozzle with a multi-stream rotary nozzle. The difference between this is these can be adjusted from anywhere from 90 degrees to a 270 degrees pattern. And they also have a range of how far they distribute the water. So sometimes it's 13 to 18 feet. Other categories are 18 to 27 feet. But these can be adjusted. So if you have a curvilinear landscape and it's not exactly in a rectilinear design, then something like this is extremely helpful. But not only is it extremely helpful for watering some curvilinear shapes, but it's also helpful in the fact that it has these fingers that kind of wave through the air as the water is being distributed. It's going to put water out. It's going to have a lower precipitation rate. So the comparison that I like to kind of visualize between a multi-stream rotary nozzle and a fixed spray nozzle is kind of, the fixed spray nozzle is the fire hose, and the multi-stream rotary nozzle is a garden hose. So that fire hose is going to put a lot of water out in a short period of time, and that garden hose is going to put out water at a slower rate. So that's beneficial just because it's going to allow that water to soak and percolate deeper into the soil, and allow that water to drive deeper, allow plant roots to drive deeper. There's less waste due to runoff because of the slower precipitation rate, but also that those fingers have larger water droplets that are generally less susceptible to wind drift. The third type of overhead sprinklers are rotor sprinklers. So again, these are very common in a residential setting. So how these work is they pop up 4 to 6 inches above the ground, above the turf or the lawn area, and it's kind of in a geared mechanism where it kind of sweeps back and forth, kind of like a turret, and it has a kind of a single stream of water that's distributing that water throughout your lawn. And again, these can be adjusted from 90 degree pattern to 270 degree pattern. Depending on pressure, availability, that's going to kind of determine how far the water is being distributed. So those are the three types of overhead sprinklers. The final question is how much time should you be watering for? The goal is to apply a ½ inch of water each watering day. So then the question becomes, well, how do I know how much water I'm applying and how long it takes to apply that targeted goal of a ½ inch? Well, luckily we have some more general guidelines the approximate time based upon the three different types of overhead irrigation on how long it takes to apply that ½ inch of water. So that fixed spray nozzle or that fixed spray pop-up sprinkler head, that generally takes about 20 minutes to apply that ½ inch of water. Rotors, those are generally about 45 minutes, and multi-stream rotary nozzles take about 60 minutes to apply that ½ inch of water. Folks might make that investment and invest in the efficient multi-stream rotary nozzle, so they're going to make that retrofit on that fixed spray head, but they don't adjust their irrigation scheduling. So now they have multi-stream rotary nozzles running for 20 minutes, but they're only applying about 2/10 of an inch of water, which is underwatering their lawn. So you really want to make sure you understand what kind of irrigation product you have and set that run time accordingly. So these are just general guidelines. There's a lot of different variables that come into play of how long it's going to take to apply that ½ inch of water. If you really want to be precise, one thing we can recommend is what we call this catch can device or a catch device. If you have any old tuna cans or Tupperware laying around, set a handful of those out in the lawn, turn your sprinklers on. You want to mark about the ½ inch line on that device and run your sprinklers and time how long it takes to get a ½ inch of water in that catch device. And that will give you your run time for that station or for that zone. So the other question I receive a lot is, if I water a ½ inch 6 days a week, is that not the same thing? You know, because we recommend at the max during the heat of the summer, 3 days per week, and if our target is a ½ inch of water each watering day, that's a ½ inch per week. If you water a ½ inch 6 days, that's still 1.5 inches. But again, going back to horticulturally speaking, it's best to water deep and infrequent, because that's going to allow your roots to drive deep as that water is being applied. So if you're only applying a ½ inch of water each day, your root systems are going to be super shallow and they're going to be extremely susceptible to heat and drought. So you see in the picture on the right hand side here, what we have is 2 chunks of grass. The chunk of grass that has the taller grass blades on it has a much more robust, deeper rooting system. That grass looks a lot healthier than this other chunk of grass is being watered a lot more shallow. You see a little bit of brown on the top there, and the roots are not as robust and they're not driving as deep. So the goal is to apply a ½ inch of water each watering day. That allows your lawn to go through the next handful of days before it gets watered again. So I wanted just to touch upon management of the sprinkler system. So I highly encourage you to observe the irrigation system in operation. So I recommend frequently or occasionally turning on that sprinkler system during the day. Maybe it's a Saturday or maybe it's a Friday evening after you get home from work. Turn that sprinkler system on and just observe what's occurring. Because a lot of times it's just a simple, maybe it's a clogged nozzle, or you might have a broken head. If you can catch a broken head, that's going to save a whole lot of water and save maybe potentially some money on your utility bill. But it's also going to really help with the health of your lawn. A simple clogged nozzle, if you can repair that and get to it before your lawn starts to show that stress, that's really going to set your lawn up for best success. Because a lot of times what happens is, if we don't observe it happening, our first inclination to do is say, oh my gosh, it's really hot out. My lawn's not looking good over here in this spot. I'm going to have to turn up the time, or, I think I need to add a day of watering because my lawn's just not looking very good. When really the problem is maybe it's just a simple repair that needs to be addressed for the health of that lawn. And then also knowing some of these main components can really help you with some of the DIY work, or if you prefer to hire a professional to do the work, it can really help with that maybe that terminology barrier for that professional as well, so you can really get that repair addressed as quickly and efficiently as possible. So the management of a sprinkler system is critically important. So now we'll move into some of the more efficient tips that I have for an irrigation or a sprinkler system. So one technique that is very important and that I always recommend is it's called cycle and soak. So what you really are doing here is you're dividing your watering time. So we learned, generally speaking, it's about 20 minutes for a pop-up spray head zone to apply that ½ inch of water. So we're dividing that 20 minutes into 2 or 3 different start times, and we're kind of dividing that total runtime of 20 minutes up. So we're not applying 20 minutes of continuous water. What this does is it allows the soil to absorb the water. It's going to make most beneficial use of all of that water. So it's going to encourage those roots to drive deeper, and it's going to reduce waste, because if we're watering for 20 minutes straight, again, going back to that fire hose, if you hold that fire hose on the lawn for an extended period of time, there's a good chance that you might witness some pooling or some runoff that's occurring, and that water is just not being put to beneficial use. So the uses of cycle and soak is always recommended. So I have a little example here of cycle and soak for a fixed spray sprinkler zone. Again, it's great to prevent runoff, pooling, and it's going to allow that water to soak into the soil and encourage those roots to drive deeper. So again, going back to the 20 minutes to apply about that ½ inch of water. But in this case, I prefer to split that 20 minutes up into 3 times. Well, unfortunately, most of our controllers don't have the capability to add a ½ minute. So we got to find something that's divisible by 3, evenly divisible by 3. So one of the biggest things I can recommend is if you just take off 2 minutes right off the top. So now we have a station that's set to run for 18 minutes. That's going to save 10% of the water right off the bat. If you reduce that run time to 18 minutes, now it's evenly divisible by 3. And now we're going to water for 6 minutes in short bursts. So we're going to water for 6 minutes, and then we're going to wait for 30 to 60 minutes. So during this wait period time, maybe you're watering zones 2 through 5. So 2 through 5 are watering. After you watered zone 1 for 6 minutes, now 2 through 5 are going to go water on the rest of the property. Maybe it's on the side of the driveway, in the backyard, and other areas on your property. So it's going to wait about 30 to 60 minutes, and then it's going to come back and water for another 6 minutes. Again, that's going to go water zones 2 through 5, and during that time period while it's watering the other zone, it's kind of giving that first station 1 that time to rest. And then you're going to come back for the final 6 minutes and water again for 6 minutes, because what's happening is you're kind of wetting that soil, letting it kind of take a breather for a second, and then you're going to come back again for 6 minutes. And it's going to allow that water to fully soak into that soil. It's going to take another breather, another 6 minutes, and now you've got that water that's drove as deep as we can possibly get it, close to that ½ inch range, and that's really going to set that lawn up for the best success, especially during the heat of the summer. So cycle and soak is extremely important when you have heavy clay soils, or if you have any extreme slopes, because both of those situations are going to encourage runoff and pooling. So if you have heavy clay soils or extreme slopes, that's when I definitely recommend cycle and soak. However, it's just a best practice, and I would recommend utilizing it at all times. So another question I always receive is, what about sandy soils? Well, sandy soils have a low moisture holding capacity, meaning they're just not going to hold that moisture as long. It's going to dry out a lot quicker versus a clay soil. Sandy soils have a high infiltration rate, meaning that water is going to percolate and soak through that soil at a lot quicker rate than versus a clay soil, where it's that's kind of the difference between sandy soils and clay soils. And then the question becomes, well, what does infiltration rate and moisture holding capacity have to do with maintaining a healthy lawn? Well, again, it's just going back to how much water can it hold, how much water can it intake. The recommendation I have is, since it has a low moisture holding capacity, let's try to water 1/3 of an inch versus that 1/2 an inch target. Because if we're watering 1/2 an inch of that infiltration rate, maybe a portion of that 1/2 an inch is going below our root zone and not being beneficially used. So try to target watering closer to 1/3 of an inch rather than that 1/2 an inch. Another recommendation I have is adding a night runtime on the final watering day of the week, and that's going to allow it to go those 2 days before the next watering day. And then another recommendation is try to add a layer of organic compost in the fall to increase moisture holding capacity. If you can kind of do this on a repetitive basis, it's going to kind of amend that soil for a long period of time and improve that soil structure at your site. So I wanted to kind of give you a quick rundown of a sandy soil irrigation schedule example. So you'll see over here on the table, we have a calendar week of Sunday through Saturday. Over here we have on and off, the start time and the station run time. So these folks are scheduled to their watering days. It appears that it's in June or July. It's in the heat of the summer. They're watering 3 days per week. They have irrigation watering on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They chose to water early in the morning. So they're starting irrigation at 4 a.m. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And this is a pop-up station that's scheduled to run 12 to 15 minutes. Rather than that 20 minutes, they're scheduling it for 12 to 15 just to try to target that 1/3 of an inch of water for the watering day. But what they're going to do next is they're going to follow the recommendation of adding that additional run time or that additional start time on the final watering day of the week. So you'll see here they've added an additional start time at 10 p.m. and they're going to run that zone again for 12 to 15 minutes. And what that does is allow the lawn to kind of go that day of Saturday and Sunday without that water before they water again at 4 a.m. on the following Monday. So that's kind of that technique of adding that fourth or the additional start time on the final watering day if you have sandy soils. So now we're going to kind of tie it all together with some lawn maintenance best practices. Again, irrigation best practices and lawn maintenance best practices for the health of the lawn go hand in hand. So we recommend using the highest setting on the mower. If you mow your grass very short, it's going to be a lot more susceptible to heat stress. It could potentially require more water in order to keep it green because of the heat stress. It's important to mow weekly and only remove 1/3 of the height of the grass blade at once. And that becomes very important because the next recommendation is to let those clippings fall back into the lawn as a source of nutrients. It's important to sharpen your mower blades frequently. It's important for that mower to be cutting the grass blades rather than shredding it. Again, if that grass blade is being shredded, it's going to kind of show a lot more. It's going to be more susceptible to stress, and it might require more water in order to keep that lawn looking nice and healthy. And then the last suggestion is to mow when the grass blades are dry. And then the next recommendation is core aeration. So what this does is it's going to relieve the compaction and again encourage those roots to drive deeper. Once you relieve that compaction, it can kind of introduce oxygen to the root zone. We recommend to do this once or twice per year in the spring or fall. If it's a heavily compacted area, you might be inclined to do it twice per year. You really want to make sure there's some sort of moisture in the ground 24 to 48 hours prior to your scheduled core aeration. If you have a lawn that has thin areas or bare areas, now is a good time to overseed those areas. So introducing some additional grass seed to that area to fill the lawn. We do not recommend power raking. Power raking is a technique that was kind of used on older cultivars of grass. If you just do core aeration once or twice per year, that is plenty as a best practice for the lawn. And then the final recommendation is it is very important to flag your sprinklers first prior to that aeration, especially the ones out in the middle of the lawn. But I also encourage you to flag those ones on the borders or the edges of the lawns, just to make sure the equipment doesn't damage your investment of your sprinkler system. Fertilization, so this is what sustains the steady growth throughout the year. It is recommended to use a fertilizer that with nitrogen. Both traditional and organic types work just as well. The schedule that we recommend is mid-spring, early fall, or late fall. So one way I like to remember this is just kind of by some holidays. So mid-spring is sometime close around Mother's Day. Early fall would be Labor Day, and then late fall perhaps Halloween. So that's kind of the schedule that I use. You don't have to apply the fertilizer on those exact holidays, but it's just kind of just a reminder of when fertilizing should be occurring. And then we recommend to avoid weed and feed formulations and spot spray those weeds instead, or just simply pull those weeds instead. So one of the last things I kind of wanted to recommend and show you is just an annual lawn maintenance calendar. This can be a really nice reminder of what the season should look like and some of the tasks that should be occurring for your lawn. So it's a really good time to sharpen that mower blade in March, right before the season starts, maybe again in June and August. I have in here maybe one short mowing for the year, so really getting that lawn mowed down, maybe some of the leaf debris that's left over from the winter, mowing that short once, mowing with a 1/3 rule throughout the growing season. Perhaps you might need to mow twice per week in May just because of the fertilizing and the moisture that we're receiving. And just to keep you within that 1/3 rule. Fertilizing again, so Mother's Day, Labor Day, Halloween timeframe. Core aeration either in the spring or the fall, but if it's heavily compacted, twice per year might be beneficial. Watering with your sprinklers, how many days? So again, just a recommendation, but watering according to the season, and I highly encourage you to water according to the weather. And then finally, winter watering is very important for the lawn. So winter watering periodically during dry periods. So a lot of times we have a lot of days where we've gone between moisture, and we've had some maybe warm days during the winter where we're over 40 degrees, maybe even approaching 60 degrees. And that's a really good time to go out there and water the lawn. So attaching that hose and that sprinkler and just giving that lawn a little bit of water. It's important to focus on the trees and lawns with that winter watering technique and schedule. So the key takeaways from this webinar is it's important to water your lawn in the cooler parts of the day. Choose either morning or night, but not both. Adjust your number of watering days with the season or according to weather. And it's important to water deep and infrequent. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a wonderful upcoming weekend.